Welcome to Boomhauer 69's channel, and today I wanted to read to you this article I found. It says, "What's the best way to buy a vintage computer?" I'll read the article and then towards the end give my kind of thoughts on it a little bit. It says here, as a hobby, vintage computing is on the rise. A generation that grew up with the classic PCs is looking back and revisiting the glory days of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s with authentic machines, but what's the best way to get the hardware? Well, we'll show you the options. The catch. Many vintage computers need repair, which is true. If you go out sometimes and get a vintage computer, it's going to need some sort of repair, whether it's cleaning up the dust on the lens that reads CD-ROM drives, floppy disk drive. There's going to be a ton of things because obviously you're supposed to every so often, open up your computer, clean the dust and stuff out of there, and nobody does, and there could always be rust and corrosion. Capacitors have exploded, on the lines and stuff and certain things, and even the old what they call SCSI hard drives could be malfunction too. So yeah, that's true. There could be numerous problems. The clock battery needs to be replaced, or memory's not functioning right, so it needs new RAM memory and stuff. Before we begin, there are some gotchas you should know about buying vintage computers. Unless a machine has been shown to be in working condition, don't buy it, right? Because the older it is, the less likely to work, and as soon as you get it, that makes it, and as is purchase, risky for people who don't have technical backgrounds to repair or recondition a vintage computer. And sometimes getting parts for older computers can be really hard. Like I have those vintage word processors that I did a video on. I know to get the floppy disk and the manuals for those, it's going to be like finding a needle in a haystack, as they call it. And those are vintage word processor typewriters. They're not technically a computer per se, and they're such a rare thing, and less people had bought them back when they was new, because everybody was more focused on buying a computer instead, that it's going to be even more harder to find information, disc and manuals for that sort of thing too. So take that in note, look at, if you're going to get into vintage computers, from my knowledge, just look at what it is and make sure it's something that you actually want, because sometimes you can get a vintage computer that nobody hardly bought back in the day, and so therefore getting stuff for it is going to be harder and more rarer. If you buy a vintage computer that was more popular back in the day, getting parts and stuff for it's going to be more common and easier to get, versus a computer that nobody hardly knew about or bought, or any sort of electronic for that matter. Almost no PCs were designed with 3 decades longevity in mind. As a result, these sensitive electronic devices, including components that degrade over time, here are some of the frequent problems that pop up with vintage computer. Plastic discolor or becomes brittle, Right, I watch many YouTubers do what they call retrobreeding, where they try to bring back the original color of the problem. Like I even had vintage computers that got the old kind of lime mildew kind of color discoloration, and I seen where people try to do what they call retrobrite, which tries to bring back the original color by putting it in some sort of solution to try to help bring back that nice tan, that nice color it was originally supposed to be, that old kind of nasty tan, brown, yucky color, that usually a lot of old computers have. Rubber components or cables may degrade and get gloppy over time, and capacitors change value and leak, batteries leak and destroy circuitry, right, because you have those little lines and stuff on your circuit board, I forget what they call them, the little grooves and stuff right offhand, that can corrode over time, so your connections and stuff cannot be good. Metal corrosion or get infested with pests from poor storage condition. Magnetic media disks can go bad or get moldy. And Right, and if you have anything that has like little rubber mini belts and stuff, that could get all nasty and corrode. Like I know a common thing on like old vintage cassette players is the belts could get the little rubbery belts can get worn out and not work right, so it may be hard to replace. Where the computer has been sitting for the past decades plays a huge role in whether or not it can still work today. Extreme in temperatures, humidity, accelerate chemical changes in computer parts. If it's been in a hot attic or cold shed or a humid basement, the odds are fairly high that there will be some significant environmental damage. Mold, corrosion are common, but if it's been sitting on a shelf in someone's climate controlled home, it's much more likely to work. With how to clean or yellow plastic on retro computers and gaming system. There's a related article there. Capacitor rot. In particular, is problems with vintage electronics is older capacitors often either change capacitance, which affects how electronic circuits work, or fail completely and leak electrolytic fluids that can damage their circuitry. Certain era machines such as Apple Macintosh from the late 80s to early 90s almost always need to have their capacitors replaced with new ones in a process called recapping to work properly these days. Yes, I've seen watch videos where YouTubers had to replace a bunch of capacitors because they were either already exploded or about ready to blow, where they got expanded, where they're kind of fat. And I remember in the 90s as a kid playing Oregon Trail on an Apple Macintosh computer. In school, they taught me how to type on a keyboard, on a computer keyboard, using an Apple Macintosh 2 LLC back when they started making Apple Macintoshes with a separate monitor instead of all one. I remember that, in the 90s. Learning one of the first computers I used was an Apple computer, learning how to play Oregon Trail and using a typing program. If you have the spare cash, look for a machine that's been cleaned or reconditioned by a reputable vintage computer seller. Keep an eye out for term recap in particular. Not all machines need recapping, but if it's done by a skilled technician, it can't hurt. Refurbishing is important for novice buyers because even if a computer is working, condition on how vintage parts will continue to degrade over time, so it might not be working in a year even if you just set on the shelf and leave it alone. If someone fixes the problematic components, you reset the clock, so to speak, and pushes potential age problems further down the road. Like those vintage typewriters I have, that one I did a video about recently. That could have capacitors in there that are probably about to blow. I don't know, because I haven't, opened it up and looked at it. The person that I got it from, they just had it in a closet somewhere, and then I said, oh, there's this old machine I ain't gonna use, so they gave away, and then I got it and stuff, so I'm probably not too worried about that. But I know if I were to sell it down the line, an actual professional electronics repair guy would probably most likely open it up and would discover problems that I don't know about and repair those, because again, I had never opened them up to make sure nothing's leaking or anything funky, so yeah, that's the thing. If I tried to resell those, that I don't know if there's any problems with it, so that would consider factors into the pricing of it if I wish to sell those down the line. Lucky, how to buy a Pacific machine. Luckily, buying a vintage computer is not is not all doom and gloom. There are a lot of fun in the hobby as well. If you know exactly what you want and you're willing to pay for it, it's hard to go wrong with these options. We'll start with the best way. First, eBay. If you're looking to buy specific model of vintage PCs such as Atari 800, Mac Plus, or heck, even an Osborne Compact, I always call it Compact with a Q, but it's Compact, Presario, and you're willing to pay for a convenience of getting the exact item you want shipped to your address, it's hard to go wrong with eBay. Yes, eBay is a good way to buy and sell vintage computers. eBay has specific vintage computer categories that you can browse, or alternatively, you can search for exactly what you want in the search bar at the top of the page. eBay is not a cheap way to get vintage machines, but is often quickest since you're more likely to find exactly what you want listed. Unless you want is very rare, you can also shop for a vendor with a reputation for cleaning, restoring, shipping machines properly is very important to find if you don't plan on fixing your old computer yourself. Social media, you can also looking for specific machines on social media. If you find groups like minded vintage computer fans, you can also ask around to see if anyone's wanting to sell a vintage machine you'd like to buy. Or you can also check out local garage sales, thrift stores and stuff. Sometimes you can get a cheap deal on a vintage computer, Like one time, it was about maybe 4 or 5 years back, I went to a garage sale and for $1, I actually bought a vintage computer, a Texas Instrument TI 99 4A with some programs and games as well. And what happened was this Texas Instrument TI 99 4A that I bought at this garage sale, I got it for $1. And then later on, I ended up going to another sale that had another one, bought that one for $1. So I had in total $2 invested in this machine. The one that I bought at the church sale, the second one I bought at the church sale, that had a what they call a voice synthesizer, a voice machine that allowed for voices to be done on it, where when you played certain games, it would do voices like say go left, right, look out, or whatever. And these two Texas Instrument TI 99 4As, I only had invested $2 in it, and then I showed it on Craigslist as a make offer, and I ended up making $100, which my father was still alive at the time, and he was even shocked that I made that much. He's like, "Wow, you only spent $2 on the whole lot and ended up making $100." So yeah, and even for that time, Texas Instruments were going for quite a pretty penny, as far as I know, and so all in all, I made $100. Now, did I sell those for whatever the going rate value was? I don't know. But either way, I only spent $2. I made probably $98 profits total. So yeah, I made money either way. But it is good to, if you buy something, look at what it's going for if you plan on reselling it, to put out there for the best market value. Social media, you can also try looking for specific machines on social media. If you find a group like minded vintage computer fans, you can also ask around to see if anyone's willing to sell the machine you'd like to buy. On Reddit, retro battle stations and vintage computing are both popular groups. On Facebook, there are fair number of vintage computer groups like Vintage Retro Computing Swap Meets and Vintage Computer Sales. I sold the vintage computers I had on Craigslist, because at the time Craigslist was the popular one. And then, of course, there's also Facebook Marketplace. You can look around to find a vintage computer site. Shop Goodwill, which is mentioned here, is another good one, and eBay as well. There are websites other than eBay that allows you to search for specific models of computers, like Shop Goodwill sells items gathered from a popular chain of American thrift stores, and there may be equivalent in other countries as well. Hardcore Japanese computer collectors often visit Yahoo Japanese auctions, but you'll really need to know what you're doing to shop there, as many sellers won't ship overseas. In those cases, you'll need a local shipping proxy in the country who will receive the item and then mail it to you. And some Japanese, like this Japanese auction site too, they might not want to sell it to people from another country because they might not know a whole lot about doing that sort of stuff, and so they might be afraid of getting scammed or something, so you have to be careful. Same as over here in the United States using eBay, a lot of people might not, sell to another person in another country because they might not know a whole lot and be afraid of getting scammed like me. I wouldn't know how to sell on eBay, and I wouldn't know how to sell it to somebody in another country, and so I'd be afraid of getting scammed, so I just wouldn't do it in general. And personally, I never sold anything on eBay, and I don't know a whole lot about selling on eBay, so I wouldn't know a whole lot as well. So take that into consideration if you're looking for a vintage computer. If you enjoy the thrill of the hunt, if you're willing to the long game play the long game and enjoy hunting for a vintage machine with the hope of possibly finding exactly what you want out in the wild, or if you're just content to explore whatever vintage tech computers your way, these are the solutions for you. Ask family, friends in the neighborhood, put the word out that you're collecting old computers, and people will likely give you old machines that they no longer use for free, which is true. That's how I got that vintage typewriter. Is I got it for free. Somebody just said, "Hey," I found it online. Somebody had, "Hey, have an old vintage typewriter with monitor. Just looking to get rid of it." So I scoffed it up. And then I also plan on to in the near future using it also to teach the younger generation about computers, because I got a friend that has a bunch of small children, and sometime I might bring it to them and let their kids play on it and understand vintage technology as well. Put the word out that you're collecting old computers, and people will likely give you old machines that no longer are used for free. Best of all, they're often local, so you can just pick them up quickly. People are often grateful if you take old machines in and get some use out of it, so that they will have to throw it out. Many cities have flea markets that operate on weekends. Your lucky here will vary widely, and you're also more likely to find items in worse condition than is ideal, but the price is almost always good unless it's from an established dealer that sells warmed over decades old used computers, and many of which from old school surplus. Like me, I one time went to an auction sale, and for $15 I bought a tote box full of old vintage items and some old vintage video games. Like there was a bunch of Nintendo 64 cartridges, Game Boy games in this box, an N64 that actually worked, an Xbox that had what they call the Red Ring of Death, and a vintage that didn't have no games to it, but Sega Dreamcast was a couple controllers, if I remember right, or it might just have one controller. But it also had the Dreamcast also had the old internet modem with it, which back in the day would allow the Dreamcast to access a web browser. Hamfest are local conventions of amateur radio radio operators known as hams, and they almost always include some kind of swap meet or flea market due to technical natures of people there. You're very likely to find old computers and other amazing old gadgets. Yes, I went to this flea market in this town called Truefant, and Truefant was a well-known flea market, and that's where I bought some vintage video games for pretty cheap, and I made my money back, because I had sold at first. I sold I bought the whole lot for this little tote box for $15, and they had a bunch of miscellaneous vintage game stuff in it, video game stuff in it. And I sold I had a GameCube controller and a couple of GameCube games. I sold that quickly online to somebody that bought that for real cheap, and I told the guy where I got it. He's like, oh, so. And I, since at the time I didn't own a GameCube, it wasn't useful to me. I just wanted the vintage Nintendo 64 stuff and Game Boy stuff. So the stuff that I didn't want, I sold. And I also had a PlayStation, which my brother sold that. And so I kept what I wanted and sold what I didn't want, and I made my money back. So, too. Thrift stores are generally accepted donations from the public and then can sell the items donated. The proceeds go to charity. You'll often find nicer, higher end items in more affluent parts of town, but you might find older, cooler stuff in older parts of town. Like me, I've shopped at Salvation Army, Goodwill. Those are the two thrift stores that I shopped at before and found some neat stuff. And then around me, I have a lot of what mom and pop style thrift stores that I shopped at. Like there's one called Pocket Change, and they have some interesting stuff. Been there before. And this one called Helping Hands Penny Auction. That was a good one. And then there's one called Flat Reach Ministries and Mel Trotters. I shopped at Mel Trotters before and found some interesting stuff like clock radios and stuff that I liked and had luck there. So yes, thrift stores I've had good luck by myself finding some interesting things. And government or university surplus sales in America's local governments often sell their surplus electronic items on a regular basis for a very reasonable price. The same goes for the university, which often needs to discard older computers equipment when upgrading. It's not usually to find a decommissioned server that cost over $20,000 15 years ago on sale for $10. Yard sales or garage sales, these are commonly take place on weekends in the U.S. when families attempt to sell stuff that they no longer need. You might be able to find a computer or two in there, but this can be long shot depending on where houses are located. Your odds of getting a good deal at one is very high, I thought. Yes. Like I said before, the Texas Instrument computers, this guy had it in a box, and he was just selling it. He said it was the first computer he ever owned, and I said, hey, would you give $1 for it? He said, sure, because he even didn't know if it worked. But when I got home, I turned it on. It worked fine. It was just something he found in the attic closet. He decided, you know what, I'm not going to use it. I'll sell it, and he made a little money. I made money on it, when I decided to resell it. Because I kept it for a while, and then when I got tired of it, I thought, yeah, I'll sell it, because I knew it was vintage, and there would be people wanting to buy it, and so I passed it on, because I decided I didn't want it no more. And so, yes, yard sales and garage sales are a good place. I had good luck finding vintage electronics and different things, My mother was the one that got me hooked on yard sales and garage sales. And her father, who was a truck driver, he got her hooked on yard sales and garage sales, And so that's how I got into the yard sales and garage sales. And that's another thing that helped me develop a liking towards vintage electronics and stuff, Even if you don't buy something at a garage sale, yard sale, thrift store, you can still find some kind of interesting things to look at, Never hurts to look around and stuff. Online classified sites like Craigslist. Yes, I used Craigslist to sell those items, and I ended up getting $100 for them. So, if you live in an area with lots of high-tech jobs like Bay Area-based cities, you're much more likely to find vintage computers advertised in your local Craigslist. You'll also find people who want way too much for cash for their old hardware. So be sure to cross-check complete auction prices on eBay before buying. Yes, never pay way over your price. You should always look at what the going rate is for the item you want, and then try to get it for around that price or less, Sometimes you just gotta walk away from a deal if it's too good to be true, or if they just want way too much for it, just say, okay, thank you, I'll look somewhere else, What in vintage computers were? Best thing to do is, I would say, check eBay for what they're going for on eBay and around, and also check your local marketplaces too and stuff around to see what they're going for. If you're buying a computer from any source, You might wonder whether you're paying a fair price. In this case, the best thing to do is search eBay sold auctions for similar models and see how much those computers have actually sold for in the past. Right, because sometimes you might see something post for whatever the price, and they might have not sold it for that price. They might be asking that price, but they might not get it. So that would be good to look at the sold auction, see what something actually sold for versus what they're actually going for. Because if they might have it for a certain price, trying to get that price, they might not get that price. It's at the end of the day, it's what someone's willing to give for is what the actual worth is. To price check on eBay's websites, perform a search, then check sold items in the sidebar on eBay mobile app. Do a search and tap filter, show more, and turn on sold items. I didn't realize you could actually go to eBay and look at sold auctioned items. That's something new I just learned from reading this. I didn't realize that. No, I knew sometimes when I Google search something, it would show the auction and say it's already been sold and stuff. But I never knew you could actually search sold items too. It's important to look at sold items and not just completed items because completed items also return auctions that ended with ridiculous high unsold prices that no one was willing to pay. Right. Always check that stuff out. Also, keep in mind that eBay is generally considered to be a top dollar premium market due to its convenience. If you're seeing similar prices in person, like at flea markets, they're probably too high, right? It never hurts to ask somebody, hey, would you take less for an item? I've done that a lot at garage sales. I learned that from my mother. You'd be surprised how some people are willing to come down on their prices. Some people, might not come down too much, or they want. If you think something is worth something, do your research before you want to buy a vintage item or whatever the case may be. Do a research on what the going rate is, whether it's a car, vintage computer, whatever the case may be you're looking to buy. Always do your research first, what the going rate is, so you know what the going prices are for that item, and then ask somebody, hey, if they got the item, say, hey, would you willing to take less for it? And if they say no, just thank them kindly for the time and walk away or whatever. It never hurts to haggle a price or try to come down on price. It says a note on shipping vintage items. Amazon's free 2-day shipping has us all spoiled. Safe packaging takes skill and reliable shipping costs. Money avoided. Avoid the urge to go cheap on shipping and insurance. Here's why. Vintage computers frequently get damaged in shipping. True. Shipping guys, they don't. We all seen the viral videos of a shipping guy mishandling a package and stuff. So, yeah, be aware of that. That's because old computers are often bulky, heavy, or fragile, and the seller often has not had much experience shipping fragile items. Right, not everybody's going to put the nice bubble wrap and styrofoam in there. Some people are just going to wad up some newspapers in there and call it good. In particular, placing heavy items into boxes similar more fragile items often cause damage, and degraded plastics can crack in transit under stress. Right. Not everybody's going to know how to get the proper styrofoam and all that sort of stuff, package material, or they just simply might not have the money to get the proper package material to ship an item. So always, again, like this says here, be cautious of that. The best way to avoid shipping damage is to ask the seller if they're willing to take the computer to a UPS store or another professional shipping store to have the unit packaged and shipped. Right. Some will package the product up really good and do that for you, and then ship it. Tell them you're willing to gladly to pay extra for the privilege. Don't be surprised if the cost over $100 to ship a large machine across the country using this method. If you want rare computers to arrive in one piece, the cost is worth it. Right. Because, they go by the weight usually of the item, so the weight can be a lot, And then plus, if they gotta package it, shipping boxes, shipping packaging material and stuff, it's gonna cost money also as well. And here's a tip about shipping insurance. We've heard from employees that shipping stores that if you insure a package for any amount, the package often gets special treatment on the way to the destination because the handlers can be personally held reliable if something gets broken, of course. For high value items, it's almost always a good idea to insure them for the full price anyways. I didn't know about that. The get special treatment because the handlers. I didn't realize handlers get much sense. I always thought a handler, if somebody mishandled a package, they just get fired. Mostly. But yeah, insurance is good to always get your items insured. And here's some good news according to eBay's money back guarantee policy. If the item gets damaged in transit, you are entitled to get your money back and the seller is on the hook for loss. So at least with eBay, you have that extra layer of protection in case something goes wrong, but no money back guarantee will bring back a priceless piece of computer history once it's broken. So they urge the seller to take great care in packaging and shipping with it began with happy hunting. So yeah, I think this article is pretty good at, talking about how to talk about buying vintage computers, the best way. Yes, they bring up some very good, useful tips and hints, And it's also good, don't be afraid to ask certain family members that have vintage stuff, hey, would you be willing to part with this or that, Never hurts, thrift stores, again, garage sales and all that stuff is a good way to look for vintage computers, And the internet as well. There's a ton of help you sell websites and apps out there. So yeah, there's a lot of good ways of finding a vintage computer, electronic device, or whatever the case may be. Whether it's vintage cars, or vintage electronics, vintage houses, to everything, yes. And I had some good luck at garage sales, thrift stores, and marketplace at finding vintage items that I was interested in. And so yeah, it's always a good way to check that stuff out. And again, shipping too, you always want to take into factor if you order something offline, think about how shipping is going to handle the item and how well it's going to be packed. But yeah, this is a very good article, and I'll put a link in the description for this article so you can read it yourself. And all in all, I think it's a good article and really enjoyed it. It's from this howtogeeks.com, and I think it's got some useful hints and tricks about vintage computers. I even learned some things that I didn't know. I didn't realize on eBay you could actually look up past sold auctions, and so that's a good thing. I learned something new there. So yeah, if you like more of this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'll do more videos on different articles and stuff I find interesting as well. And I have other content about different products and things as well. So if you like this sort of stuff, feel free to subscribe to my channel, and hope you all have a good day. And thank you for watching this video. I know it's over 33 minutes long, but over 30 minutes long. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. And feel free to like this video if you do. And have a good day, and thank you for watching.